those of the hosts, guests, and callers. They are not intended in any way to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.
Welcome to Weight Loss Conversations, brought to you by 3 Health Medical Weight Loss Solutions. Your hosts, Bradley Butterfield, Marlene Sexton, and Brandy Wiltermuth, have over 30 years' experience treating health issues associated with excess body weight. Get ready for an in-depth, honest discussion about weight loss and your health. Be sure to visit our website at 3.health. That's THREE.health.
Welcome to Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. This is Brad Butterfield. I'm the Executive Director and a practicing psychotherapist with 3 Health. And with me this morning are Brandy Wiltermuth, ARNP, and our Medical Director. Brandy, how are you this morning? Good. And Marlene Sexton, our Director of Therapy and also a practicing psychotherapist.
Yep. Good morning.
It's not as cold this week as it was last week.
Yeah, that's nice.
I know it is.
But I have
nice,
a cold.
Isn't it? Do you? Your voice is a little husky.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
Do you?
Yeah, it's kind of that FM radio voice that you got this morning.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So last Monday we talked about accountability strategies for weight loss goals. How did you all feel that went?
Good.
Yeah. I got some good feedback from some of our listeners.
Mm-hmm. You know, it was pretty evident, like last week and this week, that people do try to rely on us for their accountability quite a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to try to figure out how they're going to learn how to do it for themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I felt like we emphasized that it was accountability to self to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you choose to be accountable, to others, that's your choice. So, good. So this week, Brandy, we're going to rely on you. It's our title is Pharmacotherapy for Weight Management, and pharmacotherapy that's a big word. Help me out here. That means
So that just means the medications that we use to help people not just lose weight, but to maintain weight loss.
okay.
Because obesity is a chronic disease, we all agree. It's a real conundrum that there isn't a standard of care for these medications, and actually all of the elements of what we know are required, including behavioral therapy and change in nutrition. There isn't where you can go as a physician provider, you can go to a number of resources and say, my patient has diabetes, what do I do? And there exists, like, start them on these medications, test this often, look for these markers, do these exams to make sure they're not having other problems. We don't have that in obesity.
Okay, and because we are a medical weight loss practice, that is what differentiates us often from either a surgical weight loss practice or a commercial weight loss practice.
Right, and so I have a standard of care because I've been doing this for 12 years, and the Obesity Medicine Association is trying to formulate that, but it hasn't been done quite yet. And when it is, then more primary care provider, general practitioners will have a little bit more insight, although I think that the stigma around a lot of these medications will keep them from utilizing medications in their treatment of overweight or obesity.
So you stigma with the professional medical community and providers, or
And
stigma
patients.
with patients?
Both.
Okay, so where do you want to start?
Maybe we should talk a little bit about how the medications came to be stigmatized.
Great.
You know, we'll review their history.
That's interesting because it's been years since the AMA and the APA, the American Psychological Association, determined that obesity was a disease.
And there's no other disease process out there that doesn't include medications as part of the therapy. It's mind-boggling, actually.
Yeah.
But
and when it
there's
affects so many people.
right. I mean, it's a pandemic, and if you look at, if we did body composition on people instead of BMI, our obesity rates would probably double.
Wow.
Because there are people who are thin-looking, who have excess body fat, and would be considered obese from that perspective.
Yeah.
So it's actually worse than we think, which also is probably why our diabetes epidemic is getting so much worse, because you don't have to be morbidly obese to become diabetic.
Right.
And so it goes pretty deep in terms of how weight has been measured, and I think somewhat ignored, especially if people came to their practitioner and said, hey, I'm gaining weight. The doctor may have looked at the BMI scale and said, well, you're not over 30 BMI, so I'm not going to worry about it. Mm-hmm. When they themselves knew, this isn't right. I don't feel good, and I don't know what I'm doing or why I'm gaining weight, and I need help. They've been asked to figure it out themselves.
So we talk about stigma and misinformation. Is part of this, though, because historically there's been so many other products, and I'll use the word products other than pharmaceuticals or medicine that have been used in the diet industry that have been, I don't know, quackery, is that a word that I can use? Or have been products that claim to help people lose weight and haven't?
Yeah, it's been the Wild
so
West.
So much misinformation out there.
Well, and part of it is the fact that there wasn't an acceptance of obesity as a disease. The medical community didn't say, well, we need to take care of this and standardize it like they do everything else. So people were forced to turn to their own devices, and of course that left them vulnerable to anybody who came with the next newest best over-the-counter thing that was going to cure them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was a perfect storm. And then there were some quote-unquote bad guys out there in the medical weight loss field in the 1970s who basically were just using methamphetamines to help people lose weight, which is wrong and bad and caused a lot of problems.
It got people into trouble.
It did, and it it forced the government to do something politically about this problem, which is actually part of phentermine's history, because it was born in 1959, and it was approved for obesity, and there are two other drugs just like it that are a little bit different. But in 1977, it had to be reapproved, and there was a group of people who had been rallying against the amphetamine clinics who said, these medications are close enough in chemical nature to the amphetamines that we want to control them, we want to limit their use, and they're dangerous and addictive. So they got lumped into that category, even though they originally weren't classified that way. In 1977, they became thought of as being addictive or having other issues with them and being downright dangerous. So what they did is they reapproved it, but only for short-term use. And that's where we got the rule of you can only use these medications for a short period of time, not for long-term use, even though it's a chronic disease. So then what happened in 1999 after fen-phen, the FDA came out with, you can use these medications short-term, but it has to be for a BMI of 30 or a BMI of 27 with a comorbid condition. So we got even more restricted in terms of who we could use them with.
As medical providers.
As medical providers, okay. Which I think most general practitioners at the time were like, just too much risk. You know, I don't know enough. I don't have the time to really delve into this with people. I don't know enough about the medications and how to monitor people.
And the popular opinion was that people need to handle obesity on their own.
It's a personality flaw.
I'm sorry, tell me what year again that was?
1999.
In 1999.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm jumping ahead. When did that change? After 1999? Okay.
It's still there.
All right.
So the Obesity Medicine Association has two paradigms. One is to use BMI only to recognize patients that could potentially take the medications. And then there's all the rest of us who use body composition because you can have someone who's a normal BMI but excess body fat, and they would then in that paradigm qualify for the medications.
All right. Which is what we're doing here at 3 Health.
Right. And most people do meet the BMI standard as well. But when we look at, if you look at LeBron James is medically, considered obese based on BMI, that illustrates how flawed that system is.
Because of his lean muscle mass.
Right, because he's so heavy, but he's in really good shape versus his height, which is also, he's tall.
Which is, I like to say, most of the Seahawks, based on BMI alone, would probably be considered obese.
I think all of them.
Yeah.
Maybe not the kicker. I don't know.
Right, but because of their lean muscle mass, they're very, very fit.
Right.
So you're saying that the body mass
index
is equally important to BMI.
Well, I'm saying that it's somewhat flawed.
Right. Okay.
I think that when you look at, it was originally not used for individuals. It was a population study to look at overall risk of population, but it got disseminated down to looking at individuals based on, we didn't have a better measure. Underwater weighing to get body fat percentage was not convenient for people to do. And so we defaulted to the scale and the BMI. And
once again, Brandy and Marlene, for our listeners, BMI is based solely on height and weight.
And gender.
And gender, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for women, the calculation's pretty simple. You get 100 pounds for the first 5 feet, and then for every inch after, you're supposed to have 5 pounds. And most people that we measure body composition on have more muscle than their ideal BMI weight. So it's obviously not going to be their weight goal.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is interesting about medications in general is how many medications are approved for many other things, and we have a handful for obesity.
Yeah.
So
it's very limited.
It is. We have very few tools.
So the pharmaceutical industry is not jumping on this bandwagon like many other things and developing a number of new products?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know if they think there's no money in it, which is probably somewhat true because the medications that were approved in 1959 are still useful.
Okay.
So reinventing the wheel, and drugs take millions of dollars to develop.
And these drugs are all generic in nature at this point.
And the medical community itself hasn't asked for them.
Okay.
But yeah,
I imagine the pharmaceuticals make a lot more money on the comorbidities.
Right. Honestly, I can't not think that the people that produce insulin aren't somewhat against these medications that help people control their weight.
Yeah, that's kind of a jaded and sad viewpoint, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the subject that we have today is pharmacotherapy for weight management. We do need to take a break. This is Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. This is a fascinating subject and we're going to pick it up when we get back.
With decades of experience helping patients change their lives, 3 Health Weight Loss Solutions can help you too. At 3 Health, we provide proven and science-based solutions for realistic, achievable, and sustainable results. We're unique, just like you, and the relationships you have with food and yourself. Find out how we treat obesity, depression, high cholesterol, and more. Just give us a call and change your life today. 425-606-0022 or visit us online at 3.health. That's THREE.health.
Alternative Talk 1150 is your sports organization's safe bet when it comes to airing your team's games. Our players are all seasoned professionals when it comes to sports programming. Imagine your games being heard on local radio. Your team deserves the MVP treatment. Call 425-653-1150 today to learn how affordable and fun it is to broadcast your games on the radio. Call 425-653-1150 and make your next season something special. That's 425-653-1150.
Don't let that herd mentality lead you off a cliff. We support thinking for yourself on Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back. We just took our first break. This is Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. We were talking about the history of weight loss medications. The subject that we're talking about today is pharmacotherapy for weight management. At 3 Health, we are a medical weight loss practice, and so we do use pharmaceuticals when appropriate. Medicine. Thank you, Brandy. We use medicine where appropriate as a tool for weight management. At the break, we were talking about the use of medications in a number of areas for health and when we're ill and how they're prescribed. Marlene, talk to me. You've been a psychotherapist for a number of years. You and I both, as psychotherapists, deal with antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications in a number of our patients.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a correlation here with?
I think it's interesting that obesity still carries that stigma of being a personality flaw. And I know depression and anxiety used to be looked at that way, just put on a happy face. And antidepressants and anti-anxieties can work very well for people. I don't know that they're meant to be a lifetime of them. I think it's a tool, much like obesity medicine, to get people started and motivated and understanding what their issue really is. So I think it's an interesting thing that people will go to a doctor, physician, and just say, I've been depressed, and maybe even tell why. I have a client right now that I'm working with whose father died, and she went to the doctor a few weeks later and said, I'm depressed, and got prescribed antidepressants. That's a normal depression. It would have been a better referral to send her to a grief support group. Mm-hmm. And yet she doesn't want to go on anti-obesity medication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so with her father passing, we would call that probably a situational depression,
mm-hmm.
where it was very appropriate for a specified period of time for her to take a medication to get her through a really rough patch.
Well, yeah, I am in favor of taking medication for anxiety or depression because it can help you. Initially, it can help you to get back on track. She hasn't gone back to the physician for a long time. She's still taking the medication. I think at 3 Health, the big deal that I'd like people to recognize is that they're being monitored with any medications, even though most of the medications we give they work for obesity and on hunger, mm-hmm. Until people can learn what their relationship.
Well, actually on appetite.
On appetite,
yeah,
which is
mental hunger.
Yeah.
Because we really don't have and cannot develop drugs that stop physical hunger, at least not long term.
So, yeah, when somebody is on, say, phentermine, and they're not feeling that, they can slow down and say, what's my relationship with food like? The same with antidepressants. If you can remove, get people to a point where they're not just blindsided by depression, we can talk about, working with her with grief.
Mm-hmm. So I think you just hit a key element here. You said we can talk with her about grief. Mm-hmm. I had a patient earlier this week that's, as I did her mental health history survey with her, has been on an antidepressant for 28 years, prescribed by her primary care physician, and with no talk therapy. And we talked about the particular situation with her, why she was on that medication. I won't get into detail. And she just started talk therapy this last summer after 27 years. Wow. And that makes me rather sad for her because it's really complicated, a difficult family history and situation. So taking the antidepressant was very helpful for her, but taking it for 28 years with no talk therapy really complicated an already difficult situation of abuse for her. And I think if we want to draw some comparisons with our practice, and what you're saying is the combination of the pharmacotherapy and the medical weight loss, along with, let's get into some of the reasons why you're struggling with emotional eating and stress, and working these together is really important.
Yeah, and the medication helps people to get to that place where they can focus more on their relationship with food.
Right. It helps them recognize when they think about eating, why they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because if they're not physically hungry, there's a reason why it popped into their head. Yep. It could be visual, it could be they had an emotion, it could be whatever. But without the medications, it's really hard to slow that down and recognize that thought.
Brandy, are there medications, I probably know the answer to this, but I want to ask you anyway, that deal with specifically with cravings?
There are. We have a handful of medications, and they work on different neurotransmitters, which are then more likely to help with things like cravings versus feeling overly hungry or low satiety. So we have medications that target maybe different things a little bit, but they all tend to, the goal is appetite suppression. It's just the angle that's taken based on the neurotransmitter that it's working on.
But taking a medication just to not feel hungry doesn't do the changes that people need to have for sustainable weight loss.
And when you look at what happened in the 1990s with fen-phen and other medications, it was just literally given to anybody who wanted it without any nutritional support, without any behavioral support whatsoever. And when you can see what happened.
So we're fighting against or combating an attitude that I'll take this medication, I'll not eat, I'll get my weight down to my dream weight or my desired goal, I'll quit taking the medication, and then everything will be just great and just fine. Did I summarize that?
That's a lot of people's thought on it.
Right.
Okay. And then what happens?
And then they regain everything.
We regain the weight, and we haven't dealt with a lot of the emotional or behavioral root causes of why we keep doing this time after time, correct?
Well, and it boils down to the eat less, exercise more mentality, that if you just, push away from the table and get moving, that's the solution. And the medications were abused in that way to help people do that, when really no matter how you slice it, that's never going to be sustainable.
So, and Marlene and Brandy, what comes to mind also is we did see this also with surgery patients.
Yes.
There was significant, often rapid weight loss post-operatively, but 12, 15, 18 months out, we saw if there wasn't behavioral change and looking at some of these emotions and change of habit, often the same result.
Right.
Sound familiar?
And that's the difference at 3 Health, is that we're really monitoring people and teaching them different strategies to deal with uncomfortable emotions, with emotional eating, with our culture, and even family systems.
Well, and I think from our perspective, challenging the belief of set rules about nutrition.
Yes.
Fat is evil, and the less you eat it, the better it is.
So the medication, is this fair, Brandy? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the medication is an effective tool.
Mm-hmm. It helps in a lot of different ways when it comes to thinking about eating. Like we mentioned, slowing down and being able to recognize where that thought of I should eat that is coming from. Then we can monitor ourselves and challenge that thought. It also helps people have more satiety. So when they do eat, they feel content, kind of more naturally or at a normal level of intake. Typical, problem with people is their portion control.
We need people to keep eating.
They have to eat.
The purpose here is not to take the medication and just stop eating.
Right, but when their appetite or their hunger signals or their satiety is so perverse, you can't just say eat less, exercise more. You have to help people feel what that fullness is earlier, so they, in their head, say, I'm full.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break. We've been talking about pharmacotherapy for weight management and medications as a tool that we're using in our medical weight loss program here at 3 Health. We'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Introducing 3 Health Medical Weight Loss Solutions, a unique weight loss clinic backed by real medical research with a treatment focusing on the entire person, mind, body, and spirit. From medical services for obesity and high blood pressure to behavioral services for emotional eating and depression, 3 Health Medical Weight Loss Solutions can help you change your relationship with food, your relationship with yourself, and with life. Find out more, 425-606-0022. Or online at 3.health. That's 3.health.
Through the generous support of individuals like you, Trees for the Future has planted over 155 million trees and changed thousands of lives in the last 29 years. With your help, Trees for the Future continues to train thousands of impoverished farming families across Africa to plant their way out of poverty using an agroforestry method called the forest garden. Forest gardens consist of nearly 4,000 fast-growing fruit, nut, and timber trees that thrive alongside climate-appropriate crops, surrounded by a living green fence. These forest gardens eliminate hunger in 2 years, increase household income over 400% in 4 years, and have changed landscapes from dry lands for monocropping to rich soils supporting over 20 varieties of crops and marketable products. Learn more about how you can be part of these efforts by visiting trees.org/radio. That's trees.org/radio.
Alternative Talk 1150. We're on your radio at 1150 a.m. We're on your HD radio at 98.9 Channel 3.
So many ways to listen.
We're on the web at 1150kknw.com, streaming live audio and video as well as MP3 archives of many of our shows.
So many ways to listen.
And now, we're on your smartphone or tablet. Download our free app in the Apple App Store or Google Play and take Alternative Talk 1150 anywhere you go.
So many ways to listen.
Alternative Talk, 1150 on AM, 98.9 HD3 on HD, 1150kknw.com on the web.
Welcome back to Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. This is Brad Butterfield, and I'm here with my partners Brandy and Marlene. And the subject today has been pharmacotherapy and weight management. We're a medical weight loss practice, And we do use pharmaceuticals and medicines in our practice along with talk therapy. In fact, in our last segment, we were talking about the medicines that we use in conjunction with talk therapy and how both are equally important in working with our patients. So, Brandy, at the break, we were talking about the different medicines that you prescribe for our patients. And to ask the question more simply, help us, how do these drugs work in the brain and in the body to be effective?
So there's basically 3 targets, different neurotransmitters that influence the way we think and feel about food and how we think and feel about ourselves about food. So we target serotonin, and we don't use SSRIs necessarily for weight loss, although there has been some off-label use of things like Prozac with phentermine, which is really an attempt to recreate fen-phen, because the drug fenfluramine targeted serotonin receptors, and it also, unfortunately, there were serotonin receptors in the heart and lungs that were affected by that medication, hence its removal from the market, some lung and heart issues. That medication isn't used anymore, and there are newer medications and SSRIs that do not target those receptors, but can definitely help people feel less anxious around their food decisions, which we know are multiple every day, right? And I kind of think of serotonin as our good angel who's saying, don't eat that, let's go for a walk. Or I say it's our good hippie friend who's like, you'll feel better if you just do this instead, and let's not eat that food because you're going to feel terrible later if you do it.
So this generation of weight loss medications are safe?
Very safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably a big question for a lot of listeners and people who aren't familiar.
Truly, the older ones are even safer because we have a lot more data on, the way they've been used for 60 years. So obviously, if they were unsafe, they wouldn't be on the market anymore.
Okay.
But there are medications coming out, a handful. I think we had 6 approved in 20 years. And 2
how many
of them,
cancer drugs have been approved in?
about 200.
Yeah.
And over 200 for endocrinology purposes. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just thousands of other. You try to pick a drug for blood pressure. There's literally thousands.
Yeah.
And then for weight management, we've got like 6.
But we, in one of our earlier programs, in fact, I think our second show that we did, we talked about our personal and professional histories in bariatric medicine, and you've been doing this for quite some time.
About 12 years, yeah.
Which in bariatric medicine is a long time, and you'd started with Dr. Hendricks.
Yeah.
And he was one of the pioneers in this field using medications, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think he was the first, but he's definitely an advocate and has been fighting for the destigmatization of these medications for a long time. And he's been somewhat successful within the Obesity Medicine Association, but outside of that, I feel like we're still pushing the rock up the hill, as you like to say. But so back to the role of the medications on neurotransmitters, they really work in the brain. So serotonin, if we can increase that, people feel better anyway. They don't tend to choose food to feel better, or they have a way of being calm enough around that decision to do something else besides eat as a distraction, which gives them time to process, it was just a craving. And we use those medications, but they're not generally thought of as a first-line drug. So they exist, but they're not my favorite. So on the other end of the spectrum is dopamine, which is the bad angel, and it's the drug addict. And it likes us to feel good regardless of the consequence. So it really doesn't matter what you do to produce dopamine in your brain, although we obviously deal with people who are eating sugar and other foods that trigger it. But it's the part of your brain that says, you just started your weight loss plan, you go into work, and there's a box of donuts. Inevitable, right? Mm-hmm. And dopamine is the part of the brain that says, why don't you just have a bite? Just have a little bit.
Just a little.
You know, and then we're smart. We know as soon as we have that bite, we're going to want more.
It's the pleasure center.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And there are so many things that get triggered by it, right? I mean, people are addicted to pretty much anything you can imagine. But food is particularly powerful, almost as powerful as cocaine and heroin to elicit that dopamine response. So we use medications that target that neurotransmitter receptor by decreasing the effect of the dopamine. And then we have norepinephrine, which is my favorite target because norepinephrine is sort of like the non-emotional general of the brain, right? And so when we increase norepinephrine in the hunger center of the brain, it's like we're the general of the army who says, I don't really care how you feel about doing this task. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to build the bridge, right? We're going to get the supplies. We're going to plan it out. We're going to do these things. And so when we translate that into eating or making decisions around eating, it's an easier time to think less or be influenced less by the emotional part of the brain, saying, I want to feel good, and I want to feel good right now, and food will do that for me. So norepinephrine is the main target of most of the therapies that we use. But in particular, if we're talking about the most common medication used, which is phentermine, it does influence all of the neurotransmitters. So it's my favorite medication to use because it's sort of hitting all three of them. The amount it does that for each person or how strong it influences the other neurotransmitters is very variable based on each person.
So you're looking at each patient obviously as an individual, which is what we do from the very beginning when we run all of their labs.
And when I talk to them about their eating behavior, a lot of people will say, oh, I need that one. That's the drug I need. You know, when I'm describing how they work in the brain and what they do to help people make better decisions around food, people know themselves pretty well.
They
Okay,
do.
so
They do.
that's the starting prescription, but if it needs some adjustment as they go along,
We tinker.
you'll tinker with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I do have patients on all three different types of medications that affect all three neurotransmitters, which is also, not uncommon when you're treating anything else like blood pressure or diabetes. You start with one and then you add. But when we only have 6 tools, you get 3 on board and you're halfway done, And usually it doesn't really require that many, but there are people who benefit from it. So.
And then for the behavioral part, we do at 3 Health what we call a curriculum and understand the basic hurdles that people or more brick walls that people will hit as they're trying to lose weight. And we can offer strategies around that. And sometimes just knowing that that's a really common thing.
Right.
People come up with their own strategies of how they're going to deal with food pushers or late nights at work or, their crazy schedules.
I'm curious, what do you guys hear about when people start taking the medications? Do they relate to you, how they feel different in terms of their eating behavior?
I get a lot of positive. Initially, there's some fear about taking them. And I think it is really interesting because if somebody had cancer, which is a disease, they wouldn't say, well, I'd like to just see if I can do this on my own.
Right.
They're really still, even in this day and age, obesity is a disease. And people still blame themselves for it. So initially there's some hesitation about starting the medication. And we don't force medication on anybody.
No.
If they say, let me see if I can try this without, we'll do that. And then eventually they say, I do need a tool. I need some, I'm hungry all the time.
And just like a lot of medications that are used to help people with changing behavior, most likely it's not going to be something that they're going to take forever.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like success. These medications, people will come in and they will find some success and some weight loss, and they will come in and their attitudes change, and they're then ready to do more work and different work with the success that they see.
One of the most common things I've heard is it's a relief not to be thinking about food all the time.
Yeah, I call it food harassment.
Okay, yeah. And I remember first hearing that years ago at the other clinic, that it's just nice not to have to think about food.
Right. But on the other hand, we're like, you need to eat this much protein.
Then Marlene, we can start, frankly, thinking about other things, and those are where those other things are where you and I come in, and we'll start. Maybe we dig a little deeper and start thinking about other issues that have been sitting there for a number of years.
Yeah.
We deal with those. We get to some of those emotional eating, either disorders or emotional eating items that breed more success, and people will start seeing, oh, now I get why I was struggling with food. But initially, as you said, Brandy, if you're hungry all the time or craving all the time, it's tough to go to that deeper work sometimes.
Well, then, like you always say, people rely on willpower, which is just a myth.
Who wants to have those late night conversations with themselves or with what's behind the cupboard? So. It's time to take another break. This is Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. We've been talking about pharmacotherapy for weight management. It's been a fascinating subject. Brandy, when we come back, I think one of the questions that our listeners are going to have is, how do the pharmacotherapy or these medicines interact maybe with other medicines that they might be taking if they're diabetic, or Marlene, you mentioned cancer medications, or even over-the-counter medications. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
With decades of experience helping patients change their lives, 3 Health Weight Loss Solutions can help you too. At 3 Health, we provide proven and science-based solutions for realistic, achievable, and sustainable results. We're unique, just like you, and the relationships you have with food and yourself. Find out how we treat obesity, depression, high cholesterol, and more. Just give us a call and change your life today. 425-606-0022. Or visit us online at 3.health. That's THREE.health.
It's time that you are heard, and I don't mean in just a conversation. I mean really heard. Imagine hosting your very own radio program on Alternative Talk 1150. Talk about being heard. Call 425-653-1150 right now to learn how affordable it can be to host your own radio show. Time slots are going fast, so take hold of this chance by dialing 425-653-1150. Alternative Talk. We have an opportunity waiting just for you.
Alternative Talk 1150, the talk of the sound.
Welcome back to Weight Loss Conversations with 3 Health. This is the final segment in today's show. We've been talking about pharmacotherapy and weight management. The first segment, we talked about the history of medications and weight loss, and then we went on to talk about using medicine as a tool along with talk therapy for effective weight loss and health. And in this segment, Brandy, I'd like to talk about how these weight loss drugs might work or interact with other medications that our listeners might be taking. If they're taking diabetic medications, or if a patient was on a cancer therapy, or many of us are taking blood pressure medications or things like that. And then as a follow-up to that, are some of the other medications we're taking causing us to gain weight? I know that you're an expert at that, and patients come in here, and I know they ask those questions.
Oh, yeah. So there are a number of medications that people take for all kinds of things. Blood pressure, diabetes are kind of the top things that we see, but also psychiatric medications and steroids obviously can lead to weight gain that people are taking, and sometimes they know that there's a risk, and a lot of times they don't know. So part of our job in medical weight loss is to identify those medications, and I don't yank people off their primary care's recommended therapies, but we address that, if weight loss is slow or seems stunted based on what you're doing, we may have to look at those medications and make some modifications. Honestly, I don't see that happening that often anymore. I think also general practitioners are becoming more aware of medications that are known to cause weight gain. And sometimes they don't use them, and sometimes they still do. But most of the time I can get people to lose weight even if they're taking some of those medications. And there really isn't like direct contraindications to any other medication that people are taking. It's more the issue of if you take these medications and you lose weight, you're going to need a reduction in the dose of the medications that are affecting your blood pressure and your diabetes, and as your GERD gets better and as you're sleeping better. So my fun part of my job is to take people off medications because they don't need them because they're losing weight.
Which is wonderful.
Which is great, yeah.
And Marlene, you and I, as psychotherapists, we do diagnostic mental health, and a lot of our patients have been taking antidepressant or anti-anxiety medications, and we will work with our patients either looking at what they are taking, or sometimes if they need to take additional medications with psychotropics, and so we will coordinate those medications with Brandy and what's appropriate in that case too. As I had said earlier, patients will come in here and they'll be taking a psychotropic medication that's been prescribed by a primary care physician for years and years and years and years with no new evaluation of whether that's necessary or not. So.
Often the patient themselves wonders, do I still need to be on this?
Yeah.
So it is, having Brandy do the medical side and really determine what medications they need now for their lifestyle, for their life stage.
Right.
And you and I will look at the mental health situations to see whether the antidepressant or anti-anxiety medication is appropriate.
Yeah.
Or sometimes whether maybe there needs to be a new prescription for that.
Yeah.
So.
There are a few conditions that we really shouldn't use some of these medications because they can potentiate how that disease process might, progress, such as severe coronary artery disease. Honestly, we don't see those people. They're too sick to come in here, to be honest. And then people with narrow angle glaucoma, some of the medications can increase the risk of higher pressure. And then if someone has had and is having uncontrolled blood pressure, those are kind of the three things that we look at and go, we can help you lose weight, but probably not if you're having those things. Is medication going to be a tool?
Right.
So there is a few things.
Yeah, I'm just being reminded now in the 70s and 80s and 90s that people would often just go to a diet clinic, where a MD would prescribe diet pills and not look at any of the interactions with other drugs and stuff.
And a lot of those were amphetamines.
Yeah, and it just, I think that might be one of the things that comes up for people when they're resistant to taking any
Yeah, they
medicine.
think it's that. Yeah, for sure.
And those were the olden days.
Which,
the other thing I would throw in here too, with our quite sophisticated electronic medical record systems, and we work closely with our primary care physicians of all of our patients. There's a lot of good communication going back and forth about how our patients are being treated.
Yeah.
And that's important, that there's good communication going back and forth.
As long as they're signing releases.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's correct. So, Brandy, what else do you have to add? Do you feel today it's not a particularly simple subject about pharmacotherapy. There's been a lot of misinformation and sometimes even prejudice around medications and medical weight loss. What else is on your mind today that you're thinking about?
Well, I guess the main point that I want to get across is that, we've been using these medications for a long time, and once in a while I have to take somebody off of one of the medications, but they're generally safe, and especially when you're being monitored by somebody who knows how to use the medications, they're very safe. So I would encourage people, they might be thinking, listening, and going, well, I'm just going to go ask my regular doctor, my general practitioner, if I can get a prescription for one of these medications. And most general practitioners are pretty reluctant to do that because they know they don't know how to monitor and adjust the medications. So they're likely to say no.
So it's pretty specialized.
Right.
It takes experience.
But, if you have somebody who is experienced in these medications and knows how to adjust them based on what's going on with your eating and everything else, behavior-wise, they can be a very effective tool. And again, most of the time it's not a lifelong thing, but it is longer than 3 months.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that even if a physician prescribes it, that where's the behavior changes that go with it.
That's why I encourage people not to do that route.
Yeah.
And we've talked about behavior change in the medications. Obviously, the thing that you're very, very good at is the nutrition also, and the eating plans
It has
is
to be
an
there.
integral part of all of this,
Right.
as we talk about constantly in all of our shows. So we're sort of at that point in our show where we have a takeaway, and I love the weekly takeaway because I want our listeners to have something to take away. It's obvious. Brandy, what would you say is our takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, I would just reiterate, kind of what I said. If you have bias against these medications or medications in general, you're probably not going to get great information from your general practitioner. You need to see somebody who knows how these medications work and how they can work for you and how we monitor people. So it would be good to have a conversation with us.
Okay, here at 3 Health. And Alexis has been sitting here with us today. She's our medical assistant and our manager of our operations. She's been really silent and been doing, running our producing board today. Alexis, we have some announcements. We have some stuff coming up. Help us out here.
We have a lot of exciting things coming up. So one of the biggest things is we're going to be at the Tacoma Dome on March 9th and 10th for the Northwest Women's Show. It's a huge event full of fun, food, and festival stuff, and free stuff. So we're going to be at booth 619, where we're going to have our InBody machine, which is our biometrics testing machine. So we can learn about your lean body mass, body fat mass, and it's going to be free. So if you guys come by, our booth is 619. You'll get a free InBody body composition test. You'll also, if you actually bring that back into the clinic, you'll get 20% off our medical evaluation. So it's your ticket to a discount at our clinic. If you guys want to reach us, we have 4 tickets to give away. Tickets in general are going to be $15, and kids under 10 are free with a purchased adult ticket. The tickets that we have available are just for one of the 2 days, so we're going to be there 9th and the 10th, so you can either go Saturday or Sunday. And if you email us, we'll give you a free ticket. So it's contact us at 3health. And if you guys want to give us a call, maybe you want to get started right away, our phone number is 888-606-0022. And you can always find out more information about us, the show, our programs on our website at www.3, that's THREE.health.
So that's our show for this week. We will be back next Monday on KKNW 1150 at 8 a.m. next Monday morning. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Take care.
Be safe out there.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Weight Loss Conversations, brought to you by 3 Health Medical Weight Loss Solutions. We love hearing from our audience, so be sure to drop us a note. We so appreciate when you tell family and friends about our program. Also, don't forget that our past programs are found at 1150kknw.com. That's 1150kknw.com. Have a wonderful week and tune in next Monday at 8 a.m. That's 8 a.m. Monday. Be sure to visit our website at 3.health. That's THREE.health.
The content and opinions expressed during this program were those of the hosts, guests, and callers. They are not intended in any way to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.